Yeah, thank you very much. Welcome everybody from my side. It's a big pleasure to be here. I'm a technology guy, 25 years in technology. The fact that I'm here, I think it's a big sign that I came to the point that I understand that technology will not solve the world. It will play an important role, but it will simply not be sufficient. We need to embrace other disciplines and work together. The thing that I'm passionate about for the last 5 years is the change of mobility. I think there's a tremendous opportunity to make a gigantic step forward and change the way we move A to B. Let me start with a question. So, who owns the car? So, almost everybody. In Slovenia, 96% of household. Who owns a horse? So we have one person. So I'm hopeful that in 10, 20 years, when I ask who owns the car, we have one or two enthusiasts who say, yeah, I still have it, not for mobility, but I'm a collector. This is the change that I'm talking about. Short introduction about myself. I wear 3 hats. One is I work for a business company. We need to earn money. We do technology for large companies in the transportation. For example, we work with airlines like Ryanair. We work with ground mobility companies like Daimler. I'm most excited about the second role. I'm a founder of Digital Transportation Lab. I recognize that in order to be successful long term, we shouldn't just be satisfied with what we are doing today. We should always look what is the next step. One of the activities that I'm most proud of is 4 or 5 years ago, we partnered with Avantcar, and we deployed first electric car sharing here in Slovenia. Actually, it was in this place that was presented about 3 years ago, and I'm happy that today it's over 200 cars, it's growing, we are expanding. So, very, very happy about what is going on there. The third role is I'm a chair of one of the 3 work groups in Mobility as a Service Alliance. This is the key global alliance that promotes a new form of mobility, mobility as a service. And I will be talking a little bit about this. Let's first look a little bit about the history. So, when was the car invented? It was 130 years ago by Carl Benz. What happened after this invention? Pretty much nothing. So for the next 25 years, nothing has changed. The first decade, about 20 cars developed. Nobody could afford to have it. Then the real change, the real disruption happened around 1910 when Henry, he didn't invent the car, he invented the factory, but he just put it together in a way that the car became affordable. This is the first time that the car costed less than 1 year's salary. And that made a difference. And if you look today, 100 years later, it's still the same. The car that is most in Slovenia, it's roughly below 1 yearly salary. So this is the situation at the beginning of last century. It's a little bit bad picture, but essentially just horses, except one car. Fast forward 10 years, really just 10 years, the same street, cars. And yeah, there is one horse. Today, the same situation. So imagine this. In 10 years, we switched from horse to car. In 100 years, exactly the same. 4 wheels, the same business model, the same use case, and so forth. So many things have changed. I was lecturing to kids today. I asked, who knows what cassette is, you know? Kids are looking to me, you know, what is this, you know? So many things have changed. Mobile phone, you know, 20 years ago, we didn't use it, and so forth. Car, we use it in exactly the same way as we did 100 years ago. But there is one big number of cars. So in the first 50 years, we came to like 100 million cars. Now, in the next 50, we bridged 1 billion, 1.4 billion cars. How many cars do we need? Look at USA, 800 cars for 1,000 people. Everybody that is adult basically has a car. Look at Slovenia. So imagine now, everybody in Slovenia goes to a car and stays there 24 hours. We don't fill the back seats. Why did we buy 1.1 million cars if we cannot fill them? If we all go to the cars now, we still cannot fill them, but we use them 5% of the time. So why do we have so many cars to solve mobility? I want to show you two short videos. The first one will be about Jakarta. These are two cities that I think for me are the most inspiring in terms of telling us where we are and where should be going. So let's start with Jakarta. Maybe you know it in Indonesia, maybe you have been there. 10 million people, and this is how daily work really looks like. So for me, Jakarta is an example of a city that was hijacked by cars and motorbikes. It is simply not livable. And the two most, let's say, depressive facts are air pollution. So air pollution equals to breathing 40 to 80 cigarettes per day. So essentially, a newborn baby that is born in Jakarta becomes a chain smoker on day one. And there are many, many issues because of that. And the second is, there is absolutely no mobility. There's a lot of cars, but the average speed in the peak hours is 2 to 3 kilometers per hour. It takes about 2 hours from South Jakarta to the city center, which is like a 5-6 kilometer distance. So how did we get there? So we had a horse that was moving 20 kilometers per hour, horse carriages. And 100 years later, we have so much new technology. I mean, you look at it, and then we move 10 times slower. We are polluting ourselves and so forth. So we have a problem. I have another example, also in Asia, Hong Kong. It looks a bit better. So yeah, Hong Kong and Singapore, for example, they are roughly comparable. These are two cities, basically two countries that essentially much better transportation system due to their a little bit natural deficiencies. They're islands, basically. They don't have space, and this forced them to develop basically a much better transportation system. So specifically, Hong Kong, 90% of the trips is active mobility and public transport. They have 6 times less car per capita than Slovenia, for example. This is the country where it's the most rich people in the world. But they don't consider having a car like a sign of being successful. They consider, for example, the fact that they use 378 kilo of CO2 for transportation a success. This is roughly 7-8 times less than Slovenia and about 15 times less than, let's say, Houston, where almost all trips happen with the car. The beauty that with digital technology, we can have this kind of concept even in places where we don't have such high density as in Hong Kong. So there are many global issues coming from, sorry. So this beautiful invention, 100 years made us jump from horse to a machine-based transportation, brought now severe challenges. And pollution is the biggest one, killing 4 million people, about 33% of these contributed to the cars. And then we have accidents, global warming, space, and so forth. Here I have a comparison of mobility modes. Which one do you think is most efficient in terms of space? 1 hour, 1 lane, how many people do you move? Well, surprisingly, the car is by far the least efficient. Whether it's 10 kilometers per hour or 100, you're moving about 2,000 people in 1 hour. With bike, this number grows to 14,000. By foot, you move 19,000. We have learned about this in Ljubljana. When the city center was closed for cars, suddenly mobility increases and the city becomes much, much nicer. This is regarding space. Maybe you have seen this picture before. How much space 60 people in a bus, on a bicycle, and in a car occupy. So much space. We did a calculation. When we move to mobility services in Ljubljana, we will free up around 300 soccer fields of space because we don't need excessive parking. So, in fact, discussing right now in Ljubljana, but actually we need less lanes. And actually, the changes already happen in some simpler industries. So movies, today we're talking about Netflix, YouTube. When we look at the music, nobody's using cassettes anymore. Some use still apps, but most people use Apple Music, Spotify, and so forth. Question is, when do we make this step forward regarding mobility, regarding the cars? And what is actually this step forward? So we are talking about the next automobile revolution. The first revolution was about physical move. So how, instead of our muscles, instead of muscles of animals, how do we use machines? We solved this. This is now solved. Now we need to start dealing with the information. What is your car? So most of you raised your hand. What is your car doing right now? What value are you getting? It is just information. You are sure that you will have mobility when maybe this is finished or when you come home. I came with a car as well, but I came with a shared car. I used this device instead of the key. The car that I used is probably now used already by somebody else. That's the difference, and this difference makes a big, big impact. This is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a new concept where we replace the car keys, we give up the car ownership, and we start using digital technology to use different mobility services. And guess what? Once we start this, we will discover that the current car is not optimal for any of the trips that we're making. This is the revolution that I talk about. Unbundling the private. We use the privately owned car for all the trips that we're making, and most of the trips are short distance, and we do it alone. In the city, we have 1.2 people on average in a car. Why don't we use bike, scooter, maybe a small car? Well, because we already bought the family car for the next 8 years and so forth. This is the revolution that I'm talking about. So let me conclude with this. We are now at a situation when the invention is already done. So Carl Benz patented the car. We already have all this technology that is necessary. Some will come, autonomous driving, and so forth. There will be for sure some things to come. But the technology that allows us to go to a much more efficient and much more healthy and much more livable forms of mobility is already there. Now is the time to make it accessible to everybody and embrace it. Thank you very much.